Hello, I'm Secret Man. Welcome to Mysterious Cases, where we uncover the coldest truths, the darkest secrets, and the stories that were never supposed to be solved. Some cases shock the world because of violence. Others because of silence. This story doesn't begin with a murder. It begins with a 13-year-old boy who vanished from a small town in Texas. 3 years later, the boy returned. He hugged his mother. He smiled for the cameras. He told a story of kidnapping, torture, and survival. A miracle, everyone said. But then the details started to fall apart. And the boy who came home wasn't Nicholas Barclay. This is a story about an imposter, a family with too many secrets, and a boy who may have known something he wasn't supposed to. You're listening to The Stranger Who Came Home, a true story told the Mysterious Cases way. San Antonio, Texas, June 13, 1994. The summer air was thick, humming with heat and the kind of boredom that turns boys reckless. On this particular afternoon, Nicholas Barclay, age 13, had just finished an argument with his mother. It wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last, at least, not if Nicholas had any say in it. He grabbed his basketball, slammed the door, and disappeared down the sun-bleached street like he always did when things got too loud at home. He was skinny, blond, with a chip on his shoulder, and a mouth that got him into more trouble than he could handle. Nicholas didn't come home that night. At first, no one panicked. After all, he'd run off before usually just to cool down. He'd sleep at a friend's, come back the next day, full of attitude and silence. But the next day came, and Nicholas didn't. Not the next week either, or the week after that. His family reported him missing. But even the police weren't exactly alarmed. You see, Nicholas wasn't your typical kid. He had a record small crimes, yes, but still enough to paint a picture. Petty theft, temper issues, truancy. He was already in the system when his mother, Beverly Dollarhide, told the police he might have run away to avoid a court hearing. They nodded, made a note, and waited. Days passed, then weeks, then months. And eventually, everyone stopped waiting. But not Carrie Gibson, Nicholas's older half-sister, living in another state. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Nicholas hadn't just run off, that maybe he couldn't come back, even if he wanted to. Her worry was a seed planted deep, and 3 years later, it would grow into something no one could have imagined. Spain, October 7, 1997. A call came into a Spanish police station. A teenager had been found wandering the streets of Linares, disoriented and afraid. He claimed to have been kidnapped, held in a sex trafficking ring, and finally escaped. He said he was American. When they asked his name, he said, "My name is Nicholas Barclay." The American consulate was alerted. His fingerprints didn't match any known database, but his story was harrowing, emotional, and disturbingly convincing. He said he'd been abducted by military officers, trafficked through Europe, moved from house to house, abused and controlled for 3 years. His captors had changed his hair color, dyed it dark, and performed experiments to alter his eye color from blue to brown. The trauma explained the inconsistencies, the fear, the confusion. And when they faxed a photo of this boy to the U.S., Nicholas's family responded almost immediately. Yes, that's our Nicholas. But what they didn't know, what the world didn't know, was that this boy, the one found in Spain, wasn't Nicholas Barclay. He wasn't even American. His name was Frédéric Bourdin, a 23-year-old French con artist, and the greatest impersonator the FBI had ever seen. San Antonio International Airport, October 18, 1997. A woman stood near the arrival gate, her hands shaking just slightly, her fingers twitching like she wasn't sure if they wanted to reach out or retreat. It had been 3 years since she last saw her brother. A missing poster had replaced his real face in her memory. Now, across the terminal, a boy stepped off the plane, his head down, his skin pale, and a hood pulled tightly around his face. Carrie Gibson gasped. "Nicholas?" She whispered. The boy raised his eyes, and Carrie ran to him. She wrapped her arms around him like she was anchoring both of them to reality. A camera snapped behind her, a local news crew capturing the emotional reunion. It was the story of the week. A missing Texas boy found alive in Europe, home after enduring 3 years of unspeakable horror. America loves a miracle, but sometimes miracles lie. The boy who returned looked older than 13. He was smaller than expected, thinner. His eyes, once a bright blue, were now a tired brown. Carrie said it didn't matter. Trauma changes a person. She brought him home, introduced him to their mother, Beverly. And Beverly, shaky, quiet, nervous, looked him up and down and accepted him. "That's my son," she said. There were questions, of course. Why didn't he remember certain people? Why did he have a French accent sometimes when he was tired? Why was he hesitant when asked about old friends or school? But Carrie and Beverly explained it all away. He's been through hell. He was abused, tortured. He's different now. And maybe they needed it to be true. Maybe believing the boy was Nicholas was easier than accepting what might have happened to the real one. In the house, the boy now slept in Nicholas's old room. He wore Nicholas's clothes, sat at the table where Nicholas used to eat. He became Nicholas, but something was off. He stared too long at family photos. He didn't know basic facts about San Antonio. He used phrases Nicholas never would. And then there was his story. He told friends and neighbors he'd been kidnapped by CIA-linked military officials. He said they ran a mind control operation that changed his appearance. He said his eye color had been changed chemically. It was too strange, too far-fetched. And it started to unravel. Enter Charlie Parker, not the jazz musician, a real-life private investigator from San Antonio. And he smelled a lie. Charlie had worked dozens of cases in his career, but something about Nicholas itched at the back of his skull. The way he avoided certain questions, the way his ears looked wrong, too low on his head, the shape of his chin, different from photos. Charlie pulled the old missing posters, the old dental records. And then he did something simple. He compared the old photos of Nicholas to the new ones. They didn't match. Not even close. "This kid," he told local police, "isn't who he says he is." But no one wanted to hear that. Because if this boy wasn't Nicholas, then where was the real one? And worse, if the family believed him without question, what were they hiding? Behind closed doors, Frédéric Bourdin, the man pretending to be Nicholas, was beginning to unravel. He feared exposure. And yet, he kept pushing his luck. He gave TV interviews. He cried on cue. He said he just wanted to be loved. And, for a moment, people believed him. Until the FBI got involved. They requested a DNA test. The results came back in early 1998. The boy was not Nicholas Barclay. In fact, he wasn't even American. His real name was Frédéric Pierre Bourdin. Born in France, a career impersonator, a man with a long history of posing as missing children. He'd done this before, at least 30 times in Europe. The truth shattered everything. Nicholas Barclay was still missing. The person living in his house had been lying to the entire world. But the biggest question remained. Why did the family accept him so easily? When FBI agents interrogated Bourdin, he dropped a bombshell. He claimed that when he arrived at the Barclay home, when he met Carrie and Beverly, he expected them to see through his lies immediately. But they didn't. They wanted me to be Nicholas, he said. They needed it. And then he said something else. That's something that froze the blood of every agent in the room. I believe they know what happened to the real Nicholas. And they were glad someone came to take his place. Paris, France, 1993. Before he ever called himself Nicholas, before the American headlines, before the cameras. He was just a boy who hated his own name. Frédéric Pierre Bourdin was born to a teenage mother who didn't want him. He never met his father. Raised by grandparents who barely tolerated him, Frédéric grew up learning to disappear in plain sight, not physically, but emotionally. He discovered early on that if he pretended to be someone else, people were kinder, more forgiving. So he made a life out of pretending. By age 16, Frédéric had posed as a dozen children. By 20, he'd convinced shelters, schools, and police stations across Europe that he was a runaway, an abused orphan, a trafficked boy, even a mute. Each time he was caught. Each time he tried again. And each time he felt one thing above all: control. He studied the eyes of grieving people. He practiced their emotions like lines in a script. He cried without feeling, smiled without truth. Rick didn't just impersonate children. He hunted grief and fed on it. So, when he found a payphone in Linares, Spain, in 1997, and told the police that he was an American boy who had escaped a military sex ring, he wasn't nervous. He was excited, because this time he knew it would work. He didn't know who Nicholas Barclay was when he gave the name. It was a lucky guess pulled from a missing persons database, faxed to the shelter. But once the identity was chosen, he committed. He memorized what little the internet could offer. In 1997, he created trauma to cover the gaps. And when the family welcomed him without hesitation, he felt powerful, almost godlike. But this wasn't just about fooling strangers. This time, he had fooled a mother, a sister, people who should have known better. And that's what made it dangerous. San Antonio, 1998. The FBI didn't arrest Frédéric immediately. They wanted answers. Why impersonate Nicholas? Why risk prison to enter a grieving family's home? And his answer chilled them, because they accepted me, even though they knew I wasn't him. Frédéric claimed that when he stepped off the plane, he saw fear in Beverly's eyes. Not confusion, not joy, not even disbelief. Fear. He said Carrie never once asked him personal questions that would prove his identity. She even helped dye his hair. She told him what to say on camera. And Beverly? She kept her distance, gave short answers, rarely looked him in the eye. It made him wonder, had Nicholas come home before? And did he see something he shouldn't have? Something that made him disappear permanently? Frédéric didn't have proof, but he had instinct. The same instinct that kept him alive across Europe for years. He told the FBI, if you stop looking at me as the criminal, you might see who really is. Of course, police searched the Barclay home. They questioned Beverly, Carrie, even Carrie's husband. They dug into Nicholas's past, his juvenile offenses, his last known movements, his friends. But there was no body, no physical evidence, no crime scene, only a gaping hole where a boy once lived. And now, a liar who had filled it. In the end, Frédéric was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for passport fraud and perjury. He served 5 in interviews after his release. He showed no shame, only calculation. I was giving people what they wanted, he said. A lost boy, a miracle, someone to love. But it wasn't love, it was control. And control was the only thing Frédéric ever believed in. And Nicholas Barclay? Still missing. No confirmed sightings, no arrests, no trace. Just a name, a face on a poster, and a hole too deep to measure. San Antonio, Texas, spring 1998. The imposter was gone. Arrested, deported, unmasked. But in the Barclay home, the silence left behind was louder than any lie Frédéric Bourdin ever told. Nicholas was still missing. And now the world was asking a new question. Why didn't his family realize sooner that he wasn't their son? The Barclay home wasn't a place of hugs and warm dinners. Nicholas had grown up surrounded by chaos. His mother, Beverly Dollarhide, struggled with addiction. She was loving, yes, in her own way, but overwhelmed. His siblings were older and had long moved out. Nicholas was, in many ways, a kid left to raise himself. He was angry, unpredictable, always one step away from a fight, and yet his family loved him, which is why the public couldn't understand. How does a mother mistake a 23-year-old French man for her 13-year-old American son? But this wasn't just about confusion. This wasn't about being fooled by an accent or eye color. This was about grief. Beverly had lost a son in the most permanent, paralyzing way. Not to death, but to absence. And absence is the cruelest wound, because it never scabs over, never heals. You bleed endlessly, waiting for a knock at the door. So when Nicholas or someone like him appeared, she had a choice. Confront the truth, or embrace the lie, and she chose the lie. Carrie Gibson, Nicholas's half-sister, was even more involved. She'd flown to Spain, brought the boy home, defended him on TV. She cried, smiled, held his hand, and many believed she was sincere. But Frédéric didn't. He said Carrie helped him become Nicholas, guided him, protected him, lied for him. She needed me to be Nicholas, he said, because the truth was worse than the lie. When asked what he meant, he said nothing, just stared at the floor. The FBI re-interviewed Carrie. They combed through phone records. They reviewed every police report from 1994. They found inconsistencies. Witnesses who said Nicholas had returned home for a short time after he was reported missing. Rumors that he'd fought with a family member, that he'd threatened to tell someone something, and then vanished again, this time for good. But there was still no body. No evidence. Just whispers. In the end, no one in the Barclay family was charged with anything. They maintained their innocence. They said they were victims of a cruel hoax by a sociopath who preyed on grief, and maybe they were, or maybe they were, hiding something darker. Something only Nicholas ever knew. When Beverly was asked one final time if she believed Frédéric was really her son, even for a moment, she paused. I wanted him to be, she whispered. That's all. Frédéric Bourdin served his sentence. He returned to France, got married, had children. He even published a memoir. Today, he's a free man, living quietly, occasionally giving interviews, never fully apologizing. Because to him, he was only playing the role people wanted him to play. And Nicholas? He's still 13 in every photo, still missing, still a ghost in a boy's bedroom that hasn't heard laughter since 1994. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Quantico, Virginia, summer 1998. There were 2 open files on the table. One had a photo of Nicholas Patrick Barclay. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a crooked grin, and a juvenile record barely longer than his arm. Other had a picture of Frédéric Bourdin, a man with 1,000 aliases, a master manipulator, and a childhood full of lies. 2 boys, 2 lives, only one truth. But neither file had a body. And that was the problem. The case of the real Nicholas Barclay remained cold. For years, San Antonio PD treated it as a juvenile runaway. There had been no signs of foul play. He had a court hearing scheduled the day after he disappeared. He had a temper. He'd run off before. They assumed he'd run off again. But after Frédéric's impersonation was uncovered, everything changed. Now, the possibility of murder wasn't off the table. And neither was a family cover-up. FBI agents circled back to 1994. They found the original report. Nicholas had gotten into a fight with his mother. He stormed out of the house, barefoot, with nothing but a basketball. He told his mom he was going to a friend's house. And then he vanished. But one officer had scribbled a strange note in the margin. Possible sighting? Carrie's husband said Nicholas came home later that night. It was never confirmed, and the claim was quietly dropped. But now, years later, it was chilling. If Nicholas had returned home, what happened next? Neighbors remembered strange things. One said they saw Carrie's husband bleaching the garage floor late at night. Another recalled hearing shouting, a door slam, then silence. But it was all circumstantial. Nothing that held up in court. And when asked again, Carrie said, Nicholas never came back. He was gone, that's all. But that's not what Frédéric believed. In his prison interview, Frédéric said, I wasn't the one who started the lie. I just played the part. He claimed he had dreams, maybe false memories, of things he'd heard in the house while pretending to be Nicholas. Voices at night, whispers behind doors. One night, he said, he heard Carrie sobbing. We buried it, It's over. Don't say anything, she whispered. Was it real? Was it imagined? Even Frédéric wasn't sure, but the seed had been planted. And for the FBI, it was enough to keep digging. Beverly, Nicholas's mother, died in 2010, never revealing anything more. She had struggled with substance abuse for years after the disappearance. Some said the grief destroyed her. Others believed it was guilt. When asked, Frédéric only said she knew. As for Carrie, she moved out of state, changed her name, and refused all interviews. No new leads have emerged, no new evidence, no confession, no closure. To this day, Nicholas Barclay is still listed as a missing person. His disappearance is unsolved. His case is cold. His memory lives on in dusty police folders, on missing posters, in whispers between investigators who still say, something doesn't add up. Meanwhile, the man who pretended to be Nicholas continues to live his life. Frédéric Bourdin, now in his 50s, claims to be retired from deception, but some believe he never stopped. In 2004, just 6 years after being exposed in Texas, he was arrested in France, impersonating another missing teenager. Old habits. It seems die hard. And perhaps that's the most chilling part. One boy disappeared. Another one took his place. And both stories ended in silence. The most dangerous kind of mystery is the one where everyone believes they already know the answer, because in that illusion of closure, the truth can rot, untouched, beneath the surface. That's what happened with Nicholas Barclay. In the decades since he vanished, the story of Nicholas has become something more than a missing persons case. It became a mirror, one that reflected the darkest possibilities of family, of memory, and of the human need to believe what comforts us, even when it's a lie. Let's return to that June day in 1994. Nicholas was 13. He had a violent temper. He argued with his mother that morning. He left with nothing but a basketball. He never came back. That's the version of the story most people know. But there are 3 other possibilities investigators have quietly considered. Let's walk through them. Theory 1. Nicholas ran away and died. Simplest theory. Nicholas had a court hearing the next day related to his past offenses. He may have feared juvenile detention. He may have just snapped. He leaves, wanders into the wrong place, dies from exposure, accident, or even suicide. His body is never found, but police have searched surrounding areas multiple times. Number. Remains. No personal items. No reliable sightings. Nothing. Could a scared 13-year-old really disappear without a trace? Theory 2. Stranger abduction. This theory was rarely taken seriously, until Frédéric used it as part of his cover story. Nicholas is lured, taken, trafficked, and later killed. It's horrific, but not unheard of. And yet, no leads, no suspects. No activity on Nicholas's social security or school records in 30 years. If he was abducted and kept alive, he would be 43 today. But no trace has ever emerged. Theory 3. Foul play by someone close. This is the most unsettling. It's the theory Frédéric hinted at, again and again, that Nicholas did return home later that night. That something happened inside the Barclay house. That a confrontation, an argument, or even an accident spiraled into something irreversible. Maybe he threatened to tell social workers something. Maybe it was a fight with his mother. Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. There's no confession. No proof. Just silence. And sometimes silence speaks louder than screams. One former detective, speaking anonymously, said this: "Every time we got close, we hit a wall. Not with evidence, with people. The family stopped talking. Doors closed." After Frédéric was arrested, the family could have pressed charges against him. They didn't. They never even testified. It was almost like they wanted it to go away. Maybe because it was too painful. Or maybe because reopening the wound meant letting the truth bleed out. Nicholas Barclay was declared legally missing. He is still on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's Registry. His last known photo remains the same, that teenage smirk, that light in his eyes. Frozen in 1994, And as for Frédéric, he became a myth in his own right. Books, documentaries, a full-length film, The Imposter, 2012, based on his deception. He says he's reformed now, but in one interview, years after his release, he looked directly at the camera and said, "The real crime was never mine. It's what they were willing to believe." You can fake an identity. You can fake an accent. You can even fake a family reunion. But what you can't fake is truth. The truth sits patiently behind locked doors, in silence. In the space where a boy used to sleep dart, it waits. And one day, it demands to be seen. I'm Secret Man, and this was the stranger who came home.